Hi, everybody. My name is Linda Abraham. I'm the president and founder of Accepted. I've been a medical school admissions consultant for approximately 26 years, and I'm going to be presenting today's master class. A few items worth noting before we start. First of all, thank you very much for joining us. Joining me will be joined later by Dr. Barry Rothman and Dr. Flash Gordon, Dr. Herman Gordon, I should say. Flash is his nickname. And now for those items that are worth noting for you. We're going to have a contest towards the end of the webinar based solely on content presented during the webinar. So stay tuned, you can win. If you've not yet downloaded your webinar worksheet, take a second to do so. And my suggestion is that you actually print it out. I think it will help you get the most from today's presentation. And I think Carly, yeah, great. My assistant just posted the link to it. So if you haven't downloaded it previously, you can download it now. Again, that's in the chat window. Let's test your hand raising ability, just in case you don't know how to do that on Zoom. How many of you are attending this masterclass because you want to become a physician, your dream career? Please raise your hand if that describes you. Great, you're all here for the right reasons. Fantastic. Okay, you can put your hands down. We're going to use the question window for your questions, and we're going to have a Q&A at the end. And again, I will be joined by Dr. Rothman and Dr. Gordon at that time. But you can post them in the question window anytime you have them. I'm told that some people attend a webinar or a masterclass, and they're really interested in the special that we sometimes provide at the end of the webinar. They're even anxious, and that anxiety takes away from their focus. I really don't want that to happen to you. So here's the special. $250 off any primary application package using code SAVENOW. This ends January 20th. And $500 off our combination primary plus secondary application package. There's a couple of options there too. And again, that ends January 20th. Before diving into the webinar, the heart of the webinar, I'd like to learn a little bit about you. So first of all, in the chat window, can you please tell me where you're located? City and state in the United States, city and country if you happen to be outside the United States. In the chat window, please. Troy, Michigan. Okay, great. Chicago, good. Northville, I think that's, I'm not sure that's Michigan. Okay, great. Thank you. San Francisco, Chicago. Okay. You're pretty close, Barry. I'm in Los Angeles, California. Another Chicago. Got several people from the Midwest here. Spring, Texas. Okay, that's still the middle of the country. All right, great. I guess we don't have any Easterners this evening. I guess Michigan is still Eastern time, but I always think of it kind of as a middle. Maryland. Okay, so we have East, Central, and Western represented. And when Dr. Gordon is here, we'll even have Rocky Mountain time. Okay, now for the first poll. Where are you at in the application process? Can we get that displayed? There we go. The options are planning to apply 2021, 2022, that's this summer, or preparing for a 2022 or later cycle. Those are your two options. And let's see if we can't get the percentage voting up. Again, the options are planning to apply 2021, 2022 this summer, or preparing for 2022 or later. We're at 78% having voted. Can we get it over 80? Great. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's end the polling. Fantastic audience. We have, I think, 90% participating now. And the results are that 54% of you are applying this cycle and 46% are planning ahead. Fantastic. Both groups are very, very welcome. I actually thought we'd have more for this cycle, but that's great that you're planning ahead. And the next poll, can we have that one too? When you apply this summer or later, whenever it will be, will you be a first-time applicant or a reapplicant? The two options again are first-time applicant or reapplicant whenever you plan to apply. We're at 73% having voted. Can we get it up? You're going to be one or the other, either a first-time applicant or a reapplicant. So if some more people want to weigh in on this matter, that would be great. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're at 80%, and it's 75% of you are first-time applicants and 25% are reapplicants. Okay. Okay, great. Now, I got a call earlier from someone. Let's call him Joe. And Joe had questions for me. And this is a fairly typical conversation, actually. He wanted to go to medical school. He wanted to go to an allopathic medical school. Actually, some parts of it are quite typical. This is a typical part. And he wanted to go in the US, preferably in his home state. He wanted my opinion as to his chances and how we could help him. I asked him my usual questions about GPA, major, MCAT score, clinical exposure, community service, etc. And he replied and told me that he had a 3.2 overall GPA. His science GPA was a 2.9 from a decent state school. He had taken the MCAT and had a 492, and his clinical exposure was a summer of volunteering in a local ER plus shadowing the family physician for a week. Obviously, all this was before COVID. He was a bio major, and his community service consisted of a couple of volunteer gigs at Habitat for Humanity, again, before COVID. And he wanted U.S. allopathic schools. I explained to him what I think he needed to do to become competitive, as well as how we can guide him through this process and assist him in presenting himself at his best. As you'll see in the remainder of the presentation, he has a lot of work to do. But even though his qualifications now are probably not what he needs to get into a USMD program, certainly not this summer, there's lots Joe can do to change them and transform himself into a competitive applicant so that he can pursue his dreams. Like hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants before him, and sometimes their parents, he was basically asking me, how can I get accepted to medical school? And that's exactly what we're going to discuss today. I'm also going to issue various warnings along the way about things not to do. And I'm going to start with this one. I don't think it's going to shock any of you. You're not going to get in by waving a magic wand, and a dab of makeup won't do it. And even spin doesn't really work because medical school admissions isn't ping pong or tennis. What you need is substance. And substance means competitive qualifications and an effective presentation of those qualifications. Again, I'm going to repeat that because it's foundational. You need competitive qualifications and an effective presentation of those qualifications. Your overriding aim is to show that you belong at the med schools you are applying to. And if you do that successfully, they will want you and accept you. My goal for this webinar is to show you that a successful medical applicant has to have each of these elements in their application. Those are the five things that will, five parts of this framework, not one or two or three or even four, because you need all of them. Now, your task list may shrink or grow, but it will guide you as you apply. Okay, so let's get started. The first part of the framework is the one that probably you're all aware of. You need to show you can do the work in medical school. Now, in the chat window, how do you intend to show it? How do you intend to show that you can do the work in medical school? High GPA and MCAT. Great, Emily. That's certainly the quickest way to do it. All right, that'll do it. The most common way is through your undergraduate transcript and MCAT score, and those are typically presented in the primary application. And ideally, you want to be at or above average for accepted students for both grades and the MCAT. If not, how can you convince schools to accept you with, let's start with below average grades? Well, that's depends a little bit on how low they are. Realize that averages are what they are because some were accepted with below average stats. That's the nature of an average. But the farther away you are below the average, and if both your grades and MCAT scores are below average, less likely to demonstrate you can do the work. What if you have below average grade or low test scores significantly? And I'm not talking like a point or two. I'm talking more than that. I'd suggest that you consider post-bac programs. And indeed, Dr. Rothman, who's here now and will be participating in the Q&A, is a former director of several post-bac programs at Cal State University of San Francisco. What if you retake the MCAT? You have a low test score again, you retake the MCAT. That can be a mixed bag. Some schools will take your highest score. Some schools will average. Some schools will take the most recent score, regardless of whether it was higher or lower. And if your science grades are below average, remember Joe's science GPA was a 2.92, consider a post-bac program that will allow you to bring them up, perhaps one that also provides study skill enhancement. Now, a high MCAT score can mitigate a lower GPA, especially if there's a high upward trend to the GPA. Realize that the average MCAT score for matriculating med students is right around 511. It doesn't guarantee, now 511 won't guarantee you acceptance if you get 511 or above, and a 511 below or below doesn't guarantee rejection. This is just a piece of information that you should keep in mind. And I'm talking right now allopathic schools. I don't remember off the top of my head what the number is for DO programs, but it is significantly lower. Now, your academic ability, your ability to do the work is generally evident in your transcript and test scores, the objective elements of the application. For a quick look at data on acceptance rates and average MCAT scores, I suggest you check out Accepted Selectivity Index, which you can find at accepted.com/medsi. Again, that's accepted.com/medsi. Now, realize if you think back on the stats that I quoted for Joe, he couldn't make the case that he could do the work of medical school. His GPA was below average, his science GPA was more below average, and his MCAT score were all below average. So he's going to have to do some serious work, both to show them that via grades that he can do the work and also to get his test score up. Now, that's part one of the framework. Part two, show that you know what clinical practice is, have a realistic idea of what you're getting into, and perhaps have some direction within medicine. How are you going to show this? In the chat window, please. How are you going to show that you clinical experience? Good, Serena? That's the best way. You have clinical exposure. Exactly. Now, Joe struggled to do that on our call. He did have some clinical exposure, but frankly, it was on the weak side. And Emily's adding shadowing, volunteering in healthcare setting, very good. Working in healthcare setting, even better. Okay, both of you have that. Joe couldn't do that though. Realize that medical schools want to admit people who are committed to medicine. And if commitment is based on the latest TV hospital show, or frankly, your memories of how nice the lollipop you got when you went to the pediatrician's office, it's not real. It must be based on mature experience, your mature experience in clinical settings. They want to know that you're not going to be so squeamish that you can't function at the sight of blood, that you are realistic about the hours that physicians keep, that you understand that not all patients are nice and not all outcomes are good. Now, Clint, I know you're probably all thinking it's harder to get clinical exposure during COVID because of the shutdowns and the lockdowns, but it's not impossible. People are getting it. People are doing it. You can remotely be a contact tracer. You can work on various hotlines. And if you are willing to take the risks of actually becoming a healthcare worker, you can become an EMT, a phlebotomist, a scribe, etc. So there are ways to get that exposure. And if you had wanted to become a doctor before COVID hit, presumably you could have gotten at least some exposure before then also. And they want to know, again, that you can handle the workload, the emotional strain, and the sheer hard work that being a physician requires. So that's really, really, really important to medical schools. Then the question is, do you have direction both in terms of your educational needs and post-medical school plans? The road is windy, it has curves and dips and potholes. Many secondaries are going to ask you why you want to attend their school. Have you thought about the kind of education you want to have? Is it problem-based learning, system-based learning, team-based? What combination? Lecture? What is it that kind of keeps you going, okay? Excites you to get up and go to class? That's probably the kind of program that you want to apply to. Are you more interested in primary care or specialties? Do you have areas of interest that match the focus and strengths of the schools you're applying to? For example, urban versus rural medicine, primary care versus specialties, research versus clinical focus, perhaps a specific specialty that you're interested in. You don't have to know what specialty you want to go into. But if something is kind of calling your name or has attracted your interest or engaged you, then by all means, and choose the schools based on that and mention that interest, because it'll help you show fit, and it'll again help you show realism, which comes out in your essays, both the primary and secondary, but even more so the secondary, letters of recommendation and interviews. Actually, it's both primary and secondary. So the third part of the framework, show that you share the school's values and its missions. Just to go over it again, the first part of the framework is show that you can do the work. The second part of the framework is show that you have this realistic view of medicine. So number 3 is show that you share the school's values and its mission. Okay, again, I'm going to ask you in the chat window. You have been doing an outstanding job so far. Whenever I asked a question, how and when do you intend to show fit with specific schools? In the chat window, please. How and when do you intend to show fit with specific schools? Secondary essays. Good, Winnie. Are you a reapplicant? You don't have to answer that. No, all right, well, you know your stuff. Good for you. By tailoring an application to the mission of the schools I'm interested in. Excellent, Matthew. Exactly. And this is particular. Okay, research, geography, and secondary essays. Okay, that's part of it. For the secondary applications, you were right, Winnie, 100%. The focus is on fit. Why do you want to attend this school? Why should they want you in their program? Now, you want to look, as Matthew said, you want to look at the school's mission and values. And this in the secondary essays, if asked, and interviews, be able to talk about your experiences and draw from them the qualities that your target program values. If service to urban underserved is a priority for the school you're applying to in your secondary, you're going to want to talk about your experience at an urban soup kitchen and how effective you were as a member of the food service team. If your target program has programs in rural medicine, talk about your upbringing in rural, pick your state, Minnesota, Alabama, whatever it is, and your desire to settle there, if that's true. And I want to caution you that there's a major difference between mouthing platitudes, spitting back websites, and actually showing that you share the values. The former, frankly, it's just sleight of hand. It still isn't convincing and it isn't real. But examples in your essays, bullet points in your CV, items in the activity history, the most meaningful experience essays, and the secondary essays, as well as your recommendations and your responses to interview questions, must all demonstrate these qualities: the sense of identification with the school's mission and just this fit aspect. One quality that is increasingly valued by medical schools is teamwork and the ability to work collaboratively. In the chat window, can you please provide some examples of teamwork for you? When you have participated in teams successfully, and I'll comment on them in the chat window, please. Working on the executive board of a student organization, excellent. You'd also want to include in that perhaps how the board was successful, or perhaps a specific role that you played on the board. Okay. Group projects and public health classes, excellent. Again, I'd want more detail, but that would be a good one. Leading a club, good. But again, the emphasis on teamwork. So while you're leading the club, you want to highlight how you were interacting with others, contributing, sometimes letting somebody else take the lead, that kind of thing. Working with a physician and a medical assistant. Okay, you're on a medical team there. Again, what is your role? When do you take initiative? When do you kind of take a back seat? I'm going to guess that at this stage, you're probably taking a back seat a lot, but that's fine. I was in a relay team in high school. Excellent. Again, when did you put the team first? Creating a school radio. Good. Running a lab or writing research literature. Writing research literature, I would think, is much more of a solitary kind of activity, though I can imagine it also having team elements to it. Obviously, if you're writing something with others, if there's multiple authors to the item, then that would also involve teamwork. But running a lab, okay, again, you're with a team. And how do you cooperate with that team? How do you collaborate with that team? That's what you want to highlight. If you have professional direction, or you think you know which area of medicine you want to go into, check out residency placement data to select the schools that are strong in your area of interest. You can still change your mind. You're not signing any contracts. But if your focus turns out to be your most desired residency, you may be ahead of the game. And again, it's one more way to show fit and identification with the school's mission and values. Okay, warning time. Focus on statistics, rankings, and forum rumors can obscure this aspect of admissions. Med schools have among the lowest acceptance rates of any professional program. They have lots of applicants, and they can be and they are very choosy. Joe, if you recall my good old friend Joe from the beginning of the masterclass, didn't have direction. He didn't know any of the school's values and mission, and he didn't know what you need to know in order to both choose the most appropriate schools for you and convince them to accept you. Okay. So, and now let's go to the fourth element in the framework. Demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute to class discussions and teamwork, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud. Now, again in the chat window, I have a question for you. What does this slide imply to you? In other words, as an applicant, what does it imply? Diversity essay? Okay, that could be one thing. But it's not just that. And that's a pretty good one. I don't mean to demean it. Anybody else? It means you need to reveal a habit of contribution through your essays, resume, activity history, interview, and letters of recommendation. So diversity, which Emily mentioned, is one way to do it because you're going to be contributing a different life experience, a distinct perspective to your class. But it's not just that. It's, do you have a habit of contribution? And this aspect of admissions is one of the reasons that non-clinical community service is important to medical schools. Now, when I say non-clinical community service, realize that community can be very broadly defined. Okay. It's not just the neighborhood in which you live, though it certainly can be that. It can be any group that you are part of, and community service is actually any group that you are a part of and that you serve. So you can be part of an alumni association, you can be part of a professional association, you can be part of a team, a particular sport. There can be all kinds of affinity communities. There can be an ethnic or religious community, a political community, all kinds of things that bring specific groups of people together. And the service part comes when you assume responsibility for some aspect of that community. And it is a differentiator between being a nice person and service. And that differentiation makes it more valuable from an admissions perspective. Now, non-traditional applicants, in other words, older applicants who have been working for a while, may have extensive work experience to draw on so they can show this distinctive ability to contribute because they've been working and maybe they've accomplished something noteworthy in their work. For example, if somebody is an engineer, they are a problem solver, and that problem solving ability can be harnessed in diagnosis and creating a treatment plan. If they are a teacher, I just interviewed a few weeks ago a teacher for Admission Straight Talk, and she talked about the communication skills she developed and her ability to work with people from all different walks of life. And we also discussed how how physicians are frequently educators. They need to explain complex matters to their patients who don't have the background that they have in the subject matter. And of course, that's what teachers do. And what about another Admission Straight Talk guest of mine was a consultant, and he and others are team leads or engagement managers. So they have leadership, teamwork, and organizational skills that are certainly useful to physicians as practicing clinical medicine. Realize that most medical schools have too many qualified applicants, and many of the people rejected can do the work. If not formally, then informally, med school admissions is a two-step process. First is evaluating, determining the qualified, the people who have the grades and the MCAT score, the people who show fit, the people who have a clear and realistic idea of what medicine is, the people who have the personal qualities that schools are looking for. Then the schools also want to create a class, a diverse class, going back to diversity that Emily mentioned, of committed, talented future physicians. that are going to support each other and add to each other. And this part of the selection of the admissions process, the selection part, really injects a subjective element to the admissions process. So it's not just about grades and test scores, right? There's this other part to it. And the implication from the selection part of the process is yes, they want someone who can do the work. They want someone who shares their values, knows something about clinical medicine. However, giving the competition, that's just not enough. There's no reason to admit someone without something distinctive to contribute or someone lacking a record of past impact and contribution. Show that you're going to be a light bulb in the class. So that's the fourth part of the framework. The fifth part of the framework, reveal the personality traits that med schools value. Now, in the chat window, please, what are some of the personality traits, character traits that medical schools value? Anybody in the chat window? Work ethic, good. Resilience, good. Compassion and benevolence, very good. Positive team player, leader. Responsibility, determination, hardworking, good. Hardworking, good. Integrity, good, Max. Winnie, yeah. Hardworking is definitely something that they value. It's kind of, but it's almost like good grades and a test score, something you have to have. Okay, very good. They also value compassion, which I think somebody, yes, Natalie mentioned that. Compassion, humility, attention to detail, professionalism, teamwork, communication skills, both the ability to speak clearly and to listen well. In all parts of your application, your primary, your secondary, your interviews, and your casual interactions at the medical school have to demonstrate these qualities. Don't blow your medical school chances by being rude to a janitor or a receptionist. But the good qualities, the compassion, humility, professionalism, etc., those traits should come through in the stories you tell in your personal statements, the most meaningful experiences, the activity descriptions, the secondaries, the interviews, everything. Okay. Again, somebody said leadership. Absolutely. It's highly valued, but teamwork, as I mentioned a minute ago, is gaining and becoming really the flip side of that golden leadership coin. You have to be able to take responsibility in leadership roles, and you also have to be a team player and sometimes let somebody else take the lead. Compassion and caring, absolutely required. Medical school admissions application readers want to be able to see you caring for their loved ones. Humility doesn't mean that you demean yourself, but is definitely the opposite of arrogance and absolutely required for effective teamwork. And attention to detail is reflected in the care you take on your essays and applications. And I have to tell you that several years ago, I interviewed the Assistant Dean of Admissions at SUNY Upstate. I've interviewed her several times, actually, Jennifer Welch, and she just railed against the typos and lack of punctuation that they sometimes see on what was then a very simple secondary application. So just realize applicants, your applications aren't Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, or Instagram. You're applying to professional school, and your application has to show that you're a professional. So clean it up. Speaking of social media, that's it, clean it up. There was a Kaplan survey a couple of years ago, and at that time, it showed that 29% of medical school admission staff did check applicants' social media accounts, obviously the public ones, and a majority found something that negatively affected an applicant's admissions chances. So clean up what you're presenting to them in your application and clean up what they could find online. So, in selecting the examples in your essays and interviews that I've been emphasizing, choose those examples, experience, and anecdotes that answer the question posed in the case of the secondaries and reveal these traits, most of which are also reflected in med school values in one way or the other. And I wanted to kind of break this out as a separate part of the framework to just emphasize it. I could have combined them, but I really felt, you got to both look at the school's mission. That's one thing. And the other, and they're not identical. There might be a little overlap, but they're not identical. And also think about how you are portraying yourself as a human being. And don't make the reader think too hard. As Sydney Foote articulately laid out in her Nail Your Medical School interview webinar, explicitly weave into your anecdotes the traits you want the schools to recognize. Don't rely on them to figure it out or to come to the conclusion that you want them to reach. Tell them. One more way to show professionalism, commitment, discipline, and organization is to apply early and respond to all secondaries quickly. Almost every medical school admissions person I have ever spoken with, and I've spoken to many at this point, says apply early. Excuse me a second. Dr. Ryan Gray of med school headquarters, pre-med headquarters, says that medical school's admissions, and I think he uses a good metaphor, is like musical chairs. As there are fewer and fewer chairs left, it's harder to grab one. So with secondaries, return them ideally within 2 weeks of receipt. Get your primary in, hopefully in June, but don't compromise on quality. That's the tough part. Yeah, you can rattle something off pretty quick, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about get that primary in June, high quality, get the secondaries in within 2 weeks of receipt, again with quality. And do research so that you know why you want to attend the specific schools you are applying to, and take notes on that research, because if you are choosing where to apply now, you'll need your notes and your reasons when you go to write the secondaries, and you don't want to have to do that research all over again. Use the time between the submission of your primary and the arrival of secondaries to pre-write the most common essay questions or the essay questions for the schools that you're most interested in. Now, let's go back to your goal in submitting a medical school application. Show that you belong in medical school. And now it's time for our contest, okay? The first 3 people to answer the next question gets a free consultation with an accepted consultant. Everybody ready? In the chat window, please. What is the first thing that will make med schools want to accept you? Okay, Sarabi, you got it. Catherine? No. No. All right. That didn't go too well. Show you can do the work. Okay. All right, let's ask another question because I got 2 more free consultations to give away. So Robbie got the first one. What is the second thing that will make med schools want to accept you? Clinic. Okay. All right. The second element in the framework was a clear, realistic idea of what to expect in medicine. All right. Okay, let's move on. Let's go over the 5 things. Number 1, an academic track record showing you can do the work. 2, have clinical experience and direction within medicine, a realistic perspective. 3, show that you share the school's values and its mission. 4, demonstrate that you will be able to contribute distinctively. And 5, reveal valued traits. And that's exactly what I told Joe when I spoke to him. These were the steps I was recommending to him. These are the things that we advise our clients to do when we work with them. And a little bonus advice to keep in mind as you go forward. We are going to get to the Q&A. The admissions committee readers are sharp, intelligent professionals. Don't try to craft, fake, or fool. The best presentation of you is an authentic reflection of your achievements and dreams, keeping in mind the 5 elements of a successful medical school application. Now, okay, Carly, that's fine. What is the most valuable piece of advice, information, or insight that you got from the masterclass so far? In the chat window, please. What is the most valuable piece of advice, information, or insight that you got from the masterclass so far? How to set myself apart? Great. Match mission and values? Wonderful. Good. The qualities that medical schools value? Music to my ears. Applying early? Okay. Great, Catherine. Sharing schools' value and mission? Good, Winnie. framework for applying. Thank you, Barry. Okay, great. Thank you. Now, I've spoken with hundreds, if not thousands, of medical school applicants like Joe, and probably on some level like you, striving to get into medical school and stressed at the work involved and the possibility that they may not make the cut. We here at Accepted know how difficult and stressful this process can be, and we're here to help you, as you'll hear in a minute from two of our consultants. Your goal right now is to apply confidently and successfully to the best programs for you. And you're really at a crossroads now. You can take the do it yourself approach, or you can invest in your professional future. Every year, we work with applicants who talked to us a year earlier and decided after taking the do it yourself approach and getting rejected that they wanted to work with us. They would have been better off working with us initially, and so would you. And we'll get to the why on that in a minute. Our clients benefit from the know how supplied by experts, applying their expertise to them as individuals. Everything I've given you the best I can in this webinar on a group level. But no matter how hard I try in a master class, the advice has to be general. When you work with a consultant, the advice is geared to you and it's specific to you. Given the complexity of the application process and the stakes, you need a guide who knows the process inside and out and who can support you through this grueling journey. You need Accepted to be your guide because when you engage Accepted, you can access professional expert advice, experience, objectivity. You can save time, apply with confidence, and apply successfully. We have the admissions experts, the guides, who can mentor you through the process so that you achieve your goal of applying confidently and successfully. Former admissions directors, staff members, post-bac program directors who have been on the other side evaluating applicants and who can mentor you through the application process. Last year, we survey all our clients, and last year of the responses we got, 95% had an acceptance rate. So again, you see on your screen right now our primary application package, our primary plus secondary application package, and yes, we even have a 2 primary plus secondary package for those applying MD and DO. These are all comprehensive flat rate options. And here's what I suggest you do. Visit accepted.com/primary, choose the service that's right for you, get the guidance you need to apply the high level advice I've given you here to your specific individual situation. Go from confusion to clarity and from doubts to confidence. Now, some of you may say, isn't Accepted expensive? Well, we're definitely not cheap because of the quality of our staff. But you know what? Rejection can be very, very expensive, far more expensive than we are. Our fees are clear, but the cost of rejection is not quite as obvious, even though it can be significantly higher. So let's take a look at the risks of not applying with Accepted. Cost of reapplication can easily be several $1,000s. If you apply to 20 programs and it's $150 between primary and secondary, you're looking at $3,000 in application fees alone. And I'm not talking about interview travel expenses, which will hopefully return when COVID is more or less over. Um, there's also the cost of a year of earnings at a much lower level than after you earn your MD or DO degree. For most of you, you are at the lowest part of your career in terms of earning potential. And once you get your MD or DO, you're going to be earning a whole lot more money. And you're going to have one more year of those earnings if you start medical school a year earlier. And there's a potential that you could have gotten to a better program with greater lifetime opportunities and even earnings or potentially scholarships. But enough from me. What do Accepted's clients say? Here we go. I've been loving my help so far. My consultant, Dr. Herman Gordon, has been very helpful and knowledgeable. And the second one is a different client. I wanted to share my exciting news. I will be attending the University of Washington School of Medicine. I received an email from the Dean of Admissions stating that I am awarded a hefty scholarship. I'm feeling blessed and excited right now. This was such a challenging process for me, but your patience and editing knowledge allowed me to express my passion for medicine. This client worked with Alicia McNeese Namankar. And then, or some more feedback. I am so excited and relieved to be accepted to a California school. I really appreciate all of Cheryl's help and input on my application. I felt much more confident in my personal statement after working with her. Or the last one. Hello, Sid. Wow, I'm so impressed. You're a genius. I can't believe how well you managed to cut my essay in half without compromising my tone or limiting little stories. Thank you, thank you, thank you. There are 17 more hours left till the application is due, and I'm not stressed at all because I know I have you by my side with the essay. Now, we would love to help you as we help these clients, the ones who wrote the comments you just saw, and thousands of other clients over the last 25 years. So, once again, this is what I recommend you do as a follow up to today's webinar. Visit accepted.com/primary, choose a service that's right for you, get the guidance you need, and apply confidently and effectively. And if you take this advice, you are going to be not only that you're going to be getting the assistance I'm talking about, you're going to be starting early. And that's a major advantage. So, as webinar registrants, you're also going to have access to the specials I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, $250 off our primary application package, which is primary only, or $500 off the primary plus secondary application package. The coupon code is saved now, and the special ends January 20th. And the reason we're giving you this much time is sometimes people want to talk to a consultant before they purchase. You have the time to do that now. Okay. I'd also like to introduce you to two of our consultants. Oh, good. And I think I'm going to turn on my camera now, and they will turn on their cameras. You can unmute yourselves, gentlemen. Okay. Hello, everybody. If you want to see my smiling face. So I'd like to introduce two of our top consultants who will assist me in responding to your questions. Dr. Herman Gordon, also known as Flash, who is the former director of admissions at the University of Arizona Medical School in Tucson, as well as a professor at that program. And he's been an accepted medical school admissions consultant for the last few years. He recently retired from the University of Arizona. Dr. Barry Rothman founded and directed 3 postbac programs at Cal State University, San Francisco for about 20 years before joining accepted staff in 2015. And now for your questions. I see some great questions here. Let's see. Let me stop sharing the screen. And okay. And let's go. Okay. For schools, let's see. This is from Emily. For schools that mention research in their mission, how much research do they expect from you? How do you know if you have enough research? That's a really good question. I know Barry and Flash, you can feel free to put your cameras on.
Oh, we can't. It says you're blocking them.
Oh, dear. Thank you. Well, I will unblock them. Here we go. Sorry about that. Okay, great. There you are. There's Dr. Rothman and Dr. Gordon. Okay, wonderful. All right. So the question again is for schools that mention research in their mission, how much research do they expect from you? And how do you know if you have enough? And so what, Dr. Rothman, you're higher up on my screen. Why don't you start?
Sure. It's a really good question, and it's hard to determine how much research a school wants. And maybe it's not so much, well, how much do they want? And gee, can I make myself fit into that, as showing your interest in research. How much research do you want? Because there are many levels to get involved in research. And as you know, research, like a gas, can fill its container. So you can, whatever amount of time you have, you can fill it with research. So I think the prudent thing to do is to figure out how much time you have to devote to research and how much interest you have, and then do that rather than, oh, I better make myself look good as a research person. Follow your heart and your interests, and I think that will show better.
Okay, great. Dr. Gordon, you have anything to add?
Well, research is in addition to clinical experiences. So
I'm assuming so, yeah.
Yeah, so all med schools, even the research-focused ones, will be requiring you to have clinical experiences. So you have to balance the clinical with the research. That said, once you've sort of covered your clinical ground, It's up to you. It's however much, how passionate are you about research, and follow your heart that way. And that should be part of your personal statement then. It's like, how has it played a role in your development towards wanting to be a physician, probably a physician scientist? And how is this going to continue once you're out in practice? So make it an integrated story. It's not like, it's just a box that you check off. It's, it should be the real deal. So.
Emily is asking really good questions, by the way.
Could I just add to what Flash
Sure.
said?
Sure.
Another place where you can talk about your interest in research is in the experiences section of your application. And your personal statement can get filled up very easily. And the wise person uses the experience section to add to their personal statement to make sure that the two together show a complete picture.
Okay, great. See, we have a question here from Sarabi. If the only item that needs support is my overall GPA and science GPA, is taking a remedial post-bac the best option, or taking STEM classes at universities on my own a better option? I'll tell you what, I'm going to start with Dr. Rothman on that one, because you were the post-bac program director.
Yes, Sarabi, actually both options are fine. A DIY post-bac program is less expensive, but it's good to have an advisor involved so that you don't just do it on your own completely without some guidance. So the school you went to as an undergrad, maybe there's a pre-med advisor there, or maybe you want to hire one of us as an advisor. The good thing about advising is it's not very expensive because it doesn't use much time. So if you hire one of us on a time basis, you won't have to spend a lot of money, and you can take a do-it-yourself post-bac program, which will lower your tuition costs. But you can also get into a structured post-bac program, and those you're with other pre-meds mostly, and there's a group of people who run the program and make it work well, and they often write committee letters, which will help your application, and they're often recognized by med schools as good training programs. So either way is fine. I think the amount of money you have and the amount of time you have will determine which you choose.
Dr. Gordon, do you have anything to add to that?
Sometimes post-bac programs can be backdoors to entry at the same school where the post-bac program is. Yeah. So you want to choose carefully for a school that you'd like to get into and have a good chance of getting into. And the reason for this is that when the faculty in the program write letters, the admissions committee at that school knows those faculty, and so they know how to interpret the letters, and so they end up counting for more, right? Yeah. So it's sort of a backdoor, but that's the way it works. So
thank you for that. Okay, Emily asks, many medical schools have very similar mission statements: research, education, patient care. So how can you differentiate between medical schools while choosing schools? So what, Dr. Gordon, I'm going to let you start that one. Should I repeat it?
Okay. So schools vary in their ability to communicate their mission. I'd say maybe half of them have these sort of very generic mission statements, but others of them have interesting mission statements that really reveal something about the school. That makes your life a lot easier because you can address the mission more directly. So for the schools where the mission statement's not very clear, I advise working through their admissions website. Hopefully there's some depth to it, so you can drill down through the web pages and discover what they're touting as the strengths of the school. It may be, for instance, rural medicine, or different schools have different strengths, and they realize this, and they want schools, or they want applicants who will fit into the kinds of programs that they're producing. So you want to look for that, and then you want to address that when you're answering the mission statement. Say, I'm really interested in rural medicine, and I know that this is an emphasis at, whatever school it is that you're applying to.
Okay, that's a great answer. Thank you. Let's go on here. Okay, so Natalie asks, how can you explain low scores in science classes without making them sound like excuses? Okay. Tell you what, Barry, you want to start with that one?
Sure, sure. There are situations that really are compelling. A death in the family, your family going bankrupt, having to sell the house. There are many distracting and legitimate reasons why you may have had a few low grades, often in the same semester. Consistent low grades, I think the best way to talk about that is to show improvement. If you have a mediocre GPA, there's nothing you can say that's going to talk your way out of that, except to show it by performing better, figuring out why you didn't do well or as well as you could have, and then remediating that and showing that, oh, for the last 3 or 4 semesters, I've gotten, a 3.9 grade point average. And I figured out what was wrong. I wasn't studying right, or I needed to learn how to read the lectures better or record lectures when I didn't, and show a solution. I think that's the best way rather than just come up with a reason, unless there's a real emergency, and then that would only be for a short period of time.
Dr. Gordon, you have anything to add?
And that's the place where post-bac programs really make a difference, is that you can increase your GPA. You can also demonstrate that, oh yeah, you've finally gotten on top of this, and you understand how to study for these kinds of classes. I've had clients who sort of got it right away in a post-bac program, and I've had other clients who maybe have been out of school for 5 years, and then that maturation and learning work ethic out in the real world completely transforms their ability to benefit from their education. And when you've got that kind of remove of like 5 years, it makes it very easy to talk about, oh, well, that was then and this is now. So.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you. I think one of the things I touched on in the course of the presentation, just getting back to Emily's question about, I think it was actually 2 questions ago, about the, muddy mission statements. And I think Barry and Dr. Rothman and I forget it, Barry and Flash talked about it earlier. They, they were, look at what the school is really good at. As if it has a specialty in tropical medicine or urban medicine or rural medicine or whatever, or infectious diseases, and that's what you're interested in, you're going to want to highlight that. That's another way to show that you're, again, to show fit and to show to a certain extent that you identify with the school's mission, because the school's mission in that case isn't so much stated on the website as demonstrated by what they're doing.
I would just add,
Yeah.
maybe one thing to think about in approaching the application process is, what's your mission statement? What is it that you want out of a career in medicine? Because that's another piece of it. And why apply to a school that specializes in something that's totally non-overlapping with what you're interested in? So you may not want to write your personal mission statement in your application, but it's certainly worth thinking about.
Okay, great. Now, another question.
I'll just add to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think people apply to too many schools, and you're much better off doing your research up front. It's like, what schools are really a good fit for you? And then focus, put in the effort on the secondaries to really explore that fit and to explain it to those schools.
How many would you recommend?
Well, nobody ever listens to me on this. I recommend about 15.
Okay.
I think most of my clients end up with 25, but I've had some with 40. I can't talk them down. So. And
Barry?
in the end, I don't.
Yeah.
There's limited returns in how many interviews you get. So you get the interviews at the schools where you have a really good fit. So.
Okay. Barry, what would you say in terms of how many schools?
Yes, I'm in a different camp, Flash. I'm in the 40 camp.
Okay.
And the way I think of it is, in some ways, it's a numbers game. And what Flash is saying is your probability for any one school goes up if you're a good fit. But also, schools get thousands of applications, and they don't always look at them so carefully. So in a way, playing the numbers game and applying to 40 schools increases your probability of getting in as long as you choose them in a careful manner. Now, that being said, 40 schools is its own punishment also, because you have 40 secondaries to fill out, which can take up quite a bit of time. And if you're really successful, you'll have a lot of interview offers, and you may have to turn some down. But I go for 40.
Okay. Now we can compromise on 20 to 25, I guess. All right, let's keep going here. From an anonymous attendee, approximately how much can a post-bac raise a GPA, considering that one has already graduated college with a lot of classes done already? I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask Flash to answer that one first, because he was evaluating applications. And
well, so it's done
Barry
by
was too, but
AMCAS,
different point in time.
right? So it's done by AMCAS, and my understanding is they just take all the BCPM classes and figure out a GPA independent of whether they were undergraduate or graduate classes. Now they do break them out by year, and so so admissions committee can see how you've improved over time. But the bottom line, BCPM, I'm pretty sure is for all of them, right? So if you're doing a 1-year post-bac, well, presumably it'll be all science courses that will contribute to your, official GPA. So it's probably, and then that's 1 out of 5 years. And so it's probably about 25% of the total contribution to the BCPM GPA. So it can help, but it's not going to raise you from a 3 to a 4. It'll raise you from a 3 to a 3.25. And hopefully you're more in the situation of, well, it's a 3.4 and I really want to get it up to 3.6 or so, which seems to be what a lot of schools are looking for.
Barry, you want to comment on that?
Yeah. The way I think of it is the trajectory of your GPA more than the overall GPA. So your overall GPA, as Flash mentioned, it has a lot of inertia. It doesn't move very easily with the addition of a few classes, but the trajectory of your GPA can change quite a bit. And this happens in a lot of applicants. Oftentimes their freshman and sophomore performances are not so great. And by the time they're juniors and seniors, their GPA per year goes up. What I like to see is 2 years of consistently high GPA without a dip at the end. And that's what I counsel my clients, to make sure that they've got a couple of years of good GPA and that they've shown improvement. I think that's impressive. And don't worry so much about your overall GPA. That's a not so informative number.
Okay, great.
I think that's going to depend on the school. So I think the high-end schools just want perfection. So if you've ever faltered, it's like, forget it, which is why I don't think it's worth applying to so many schools, right? So it tends to be the state schools, which are more willing to do that. I don't know how it's going to pan out now. I mean, I don't really understand the extra 20% of applicants this year and how that's going to put pressure on metrics and stuff. So we'll just see. But in the meantime, your life is what it was, right? And so you take it and you move forward. And if your GPA is below, it depends on the level of school you're applying to, but 3.6 or a 3.4 for an in-state school, yeah, it can be really worth doing some more coursework to improve your GPA a bit, right? And again, that's both the total GPA as well as the trajectory.
I would add that it's a good idea to stay academically alive during the glide year, and if you're maybe taking more than one glide year. I think med schools really like seeing somebody who's academically still involved, and to not just, oh, I finished my undergrad, I guess I don't have to take any more coursework. Show that you're interested. Take some more upper division bio courses.
Sounds good. Okay, let's get back to the questions here because we've got some really good ones coming in. Emily asks, is it true that you should apply to all the medical schools in your state, including private schools? Flash?
I don't know that the private schools care so much about whether you're in state. Let's see, for the Texas system, they definitely want you to apply to all the schools that are in the TMDSAS. California residents, it really depends on where your metrics are and the rest of your credentials. There's, I think probably UCLA might be the hardest one to get into, and
Stanford.
yeah, I guess there's the rule that if you don't apply, you don't get in. But there's also the rule that if it's way out of range, you're still not going to get in. So you have to use some judgment there. Another state with a lot of schools is Florida. And I think it really is worth applying to as many Florida schools as you can if you are a Florida resident. New York as well. Michigan has, I think, 6 med schools. So take advantage of your in-state
Illinois
data.
also has a lot.
Yeah. In-state counts for a lot. So.
And can be less expensive.
Yep.
Yeah.
Especially the public schools. Barry, what do you want to add?
Yeah, I would just add, look at the MSAR, because that will help you see how good of a fit you are in terms of GPA and MCAT. But also look at how many people the school takes in-state and out-of-state, because that can be a real guideline for you, especially when you're applying out-of-state. It's crazy to apply to a school that takes 5% people out of state and you're out of state. So, and MSAR doesn't give you that number. You have to calculate it based on the data they give you. But when you create a spreadsheet that manages all of your medical school applications, include the columns that will allow you to calculate percent out of state admissions.
We actually have we have the in-state versus out-of-state tool. And actually I'm going to add, Carly, if you could post that also. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. But pay attention to that, because you can waste valuable application resources applying to a school you'll never get into because you're not in state.
Right, right.
Sometimes it can look like a school takes a lot from out of state, but be aware of mission fit as well. So, for example, University of Arizona takes a lot of out-of-state students. I think they interview about 1/3 out of state, and they end up taking a significant number of out-of-state students. But those students fit with the mission, so they'll frequently speak either Spanish or Native American language. They want to do rural border medicine, right? So that's why those students are coming in from out of state, is because they fit the state mission. So be aware of that when you're applying to schools that do take a lot of out of state students. Do your homework and see, am I really suited for this school?
Okay. Now, Matthew asks, most postbacks seem to not allow entry if you've taken any prereqs already. Are SMPs your only method of academically standing out at this point if you've completed your undergrad already? I've never heard that, but Barry, what do you want to say about that?
Well, in the postbac programs that I ran, we took people who had taken some of the prereqs. and we called them late arriving career changers, just as a term to separate from the career changers who hadn't taken any prereqs at all. If there's a post-bac program that you want to get into and they're really rigid about that, then you won't be able to get into it. An alternative is to do a do-it-yourself post-bac program, where you have total flexibility and you can even take classes at many different schools during the same semester. So think about that, and maybe there are post-bac programs that are more flexible and will allow you to enter with a few prereqs under your belt. Yeah.
Okay. And here's did you want to add anything to that, Flash?
Yeah, totally agree.
Okay. Winnie asks, what is the process of doing a holistic review? Does clinical work experience weigh more than scores? Flash, why don't you start with that one?
Okay, so let's see, the AAMC developed holistic admissions, 15 years ago or so? And the idea was that schools would set sort of minimum standards for their metrics. And then once students met those minimum standards, then they would use other attributes to judge the applicants. And the AAMC site has the official list of attributes, which I'm fuzzy on at the moment. But it's, all the skills that you would like to see in a doctor, right? So, compassion, communication skills. It's just sort of the real world aspects of doctoring. And there are 11 of those let's see, 2 of those, I guess, are metrics. So there are 9 non-metric attributes that are in there. And when I was chair of University of Arizona College of Medicine's admissions committee, we used those attributes and scored, did pre-scores on our applicants in order to decide on who we wanted to bring for interviews. And I've seen this in a lot of other schools too. Those attributes become very important. Now, do all schools practice holistic admissions? No. Do the majority practice holistic admissions? No. A lot of schools, despite the urging of the AAMC, still want those metrics. Metrics are still all important at a lot of schools. You can tell on MSAR which schools are more holistic. If you take a look at, say, the GPA bell curve for the matriculating class at that school, the ones that are practicing holistic admissions will have a much broader bell curve, right? And the ones that are high and tight, like 10, it's like, well, obviously you better have a 520 or higher if you want to get in. So.
Okay. All right. Barry, you have anything to add?
Yes, I totally agree with Flash. There are many schools that don't practice holistic review, and the reason is it's very time consuming and very expensive. And so you have to think about things from an admissions person's point of view. So let's say UCSF, one of the highest ranking med schools, gets something like 10,000 applications. I mean, my post-bac program got 1,000 applications a year, and that drove us crazy. It was really challenging. 10,000 applications is huge. Yeah. And to handle that in a holistic manner, I think would be very, very difficult. You'd need a huge admissions committee. So I think just to streamline things, they have to have cutoffs maybe higher than you would hope. And so, of course, they wind up rejecting a lot of very competent people.
Right.
So that's funny that you had mentioned UCSF, because I put them in the category of practicing holistic admissions. I've had 2 clients in recent years who got in, both had 514s on their MCATs.
Wow. Okay.
And they were outstanding. They should have been there. And to UCSF's credit, they took them. right?
Okay.
So,
All right. One last question. If you are interested in primary care, but also competitive specialties like dermatology, is it better to apply to research intensive medical schools, even if you don't have much research? Who wants to take that one first? I'll pick. Okay, Barry, go ahead.
Could you repeat it, please?
Sure. If you are interested in primary care, but also competitive specialties like dermatology, is it better to apply to research intensive medical schools, even if you don't have much research?
Gee, I wouldn't apply to research intensive medical schools if I don't have any or very little research. I think that's a way of just getting filtered out.
And you're the one who wants 40. Yeah, go ahead. I agree. Flash, do you have anything to add?
yeah, I agree. I just don't see the point of forcing yourself to do something that you really don't want to do. You know,
Right.
there are lots of med schools, and just pick another one.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
doesn't mean you'll get the residency because you've done the research. Most med schools have a research component to your education. And so you will have research going into a residency. I think when you look at the residency numbers, it's important to dig into that number. It's probably telling you, oh, 90% of applicants for dermatology had research experience. That doesn't mean that they had, years and years of research. It just means that, like all the other med students, they had some research experience. So,
Okay. All right. So don't take it as at face value. Thank you, Barry, and thank you, Flash, for joining me today. I want to also thank the applicants who are here for your time, your answers, your questions, and participation. Good luck with your application. And now I have a final story, a thought, and a question I would appreciate your help with. The final story. Sally, who accepted to work with her, is an Asian American who had good stats and a strong but fairly typical profile. Her consultant coached her through the process, including coaching to overcome shyness in interviews. Here's what Sally wrote after her acceptance. Whoops, Miss Sally here. Okay, Sally's not going to be here. I'm just going to tell you. I don't think I would be at the same place today without your help. So out of 20 secondaries, I received 18 interviews. I went to 11. I was accepted to 5 and waitlisted to 4. Well, obviously, Sally's results were great, and the most obvious benefit of working with Accepted, there was another one less tangible, but no less important. Sally was more confident throughout the process. She was less anxious, even during her interviews, and that's despite the fact that she considers herself an introvert and admitted to being, quote, very nervous about the interviews before she worked with Accepted consultant Sydney Foote. And the final thought. All parts of the framework that I discussed today, which are on your worksheet, are necessary for a successful application. It's not 1 or 2 or even 3 or 4 that will do. You need all 5. Now, Sally had the 5. Our successful clients have the 5, and you can too. Get accepted. Now, the question from me to you is you've stayed for this masterclass. You've stayed for the pitch. You've stayed for the Q&A. And you certainly seem to be interested in what we have to say. So I'm curious, if you're not already a client or planning to become a client, would you be willing to share your reasons for not engaging one-on-one with Accepted? And you can post that in the chat or question window, whichever one you want. I'm really curious about this. I'll be watching both of them. Again, if you're not already a client, okay, my money goes to do-it-yourself post-bac closes at a 4-year. Well, do-it-yourself at a 4-year college or university. Okay. All right. Got it. You might, again, Barry Rothman pointed this out enough, so not enough expendable income. Can you please send a link for the packages? Do you want tell you what, here, I think, Carly, can you send a link for the packages? But it's accepted.com/primary. That will take you to them. So Matthew, I understand that, money's tight. I understand that completely. I think that Dr. Rothman pointed out, though, that if you invest a little bit of money, you might have a tremendous return on that money just from the guidance, and you might end up saving a lot of money down the road. Okay, our minimum fee is $330. That could buy you an hour session with either Dr. Gordon or Dr. Rothman, Barry Rothman or Flash Gordon.
I would add, Linda, that
Yeah,
we can have less than an hour of time and have more than one session. So
of course.
typically, if I'm just advising somebody, I might do a lot of advising by email, where an email takes 5 or 10 minutes, and a video call might be very short, so that that hour could go quite a long ways into advising.
Okay, great. Now, and Matthew liked that suggestion. And Carly, can you just post the link to the advising section of the site? Did you want to say something, Flash? No?
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
No. Okay. All right. I also want to mention to you that we just recently added a firm to the site, which means that there are payment options for any of our services. It ranges from 3 months to 6 months to up to 36 months for the more expensive services. All right. So Winnie wrote, I'm very interested. I'm a current applicant. I wish I have invested and accepted. This was mostly due to money. At this point, I'm not sure when I should start reapplying. Did you apply this cycle, Winnie? Yes. All right. You don't have to start reapplying now, but what I would strongly suggest, and gentlemen, I'm interested in your thoughts on this, you should get insight as soon as possible into what, if anything, could be improved about your application. Because if there's something that you can do now to improve your qualifications or improve your application, you need to know about it as soon as possible so that you can do it and be ready to reapply early next cycle. What do you gentlemen say?
Well, we have a rejection review
Right.
package that's not very expensive, and you could call it sort of a pre-rejection, maybe pre-rejection review, just to critically look at your application and give you some pointers so that you can make use of the time now rather than waiting till the end of the cycle and have it be so close to the beginning of the next cycle.
That's exactly my point. Right. Carly, can you also post a link to the rejection review for Winnie? Okay. And do you want to add something, Flash?
Yeah, so I've already started working with people doing rejection reviews and looking towards the next cycle. You could still get interviews even as late as the beginning of March, but you would have known by mid-February. I'd say that's really the limit. And at that point, yeah, you should do a rejection review and really I think the big decision is, do you need a gap year to really fill in your credentials? I mean, you're going to have a gap year anyway because you're going to be applying again in June, but do you need a year on top of that to really develop your credentials? That's an important decision. I'll also add that I'd say about a third of students in med school are applied more than once. So it's not the end of the world.
Right.
And I'd say a lot of my clients are reapplicants. And I think for two reasons. One is I don't think they had good advising getting ready for med school. And so they really didn't have the credentials they needed. Or their application didn't present their credentials effectively. And I really enjoy working with clients in both categories. So
I would add that I've noticed that second time, the first time you reapply is fine, and there's nothing held against you. But when you start racking up the third application and the fourth application, then you really have diminishing returns. And so I think you really should think of it as two golden applications, the first and the first reapplication, and then things start going downhill. So I would be cautious and really try to get things together, hopefully in the first application, but at least by the second.
Anybody else have any comments on my question in terms of any reasons for not engaging with accepted? If not, I'm going to again thank Barry and Flash for joining me and helping me out with the Q&A. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to thank you applicants for participating, coming. And at this point, I just want to wish you best of luck with your med school applicants. I certainly hope that we can work, if not with all of you, at least with some of you. So have a very good evening. Good luck again. Take care.
Stay safe.